Mark Swick, not to be confused with Justin Swick, with the comment about the special teams, Steve. So what I used to like about the Urban Meyer approach was you miss a field goal from 30, maybe even if you make the field goal from 30, he backs it up to 35, he backs it up to 40. You're out there to practice. I always liked the kick it again, let's back it up, let's kick it again. And there was a bad miss to the left, and I was waiting for Ryan Day to tee it back up.
Yeah, I don't get too worried about it. First of all, it was a little bit of a swirly, windy day there on Saturday, and that isn't to say, of course, it won't be in the fall because it's the same stadium where they're going to play, and the wind would be, fall wind as opposed to April spring wind. But I think the other thing to think about is when you're in the fall, the kickers practice obviously all summer long, then 4 weeks preseason camp, and then 6 days a week. And during the spring, they're only getting out there a couple, 2-3 days a week during spring practice. So they may not be quite as a groove per se as they would be when they're practicing 5-6 days a week during the fall. So I don't worry too much about it. Seibert showed last year that he's got great ability kicking the football, and I'm not too worried about him if it comes down to field goals. And honestly, it's rare that an Ohio State game comes down to a field goal. They either blow somebody out or, as we saw with Alabama, they get blown out. But I don't. I just cracked myself up there. I don't worry too much about that. I think again, it's not an offense where you worry a whole lot about kicking a lot of field goals, and they haven't had a lot of games that came down to that, to be honest with you, in the last 10 years. So I think he'll be fine. He'll probably hit 60, 70%. If that's what he hits, that's what he hits, and that's fine.
I'm trying to think of the last time an Ohio State game did go down to a field goal that Ohio State was kicking, not the Michigan State example from 15, but the last time that the Buckeyes had to make a kick to win or lose.
The first one that jumps out to me is 2004 against Marshall, but there has to be something more recent.
There was a Purdue one in there.
Yeah, Purdue, Iowa
in 2009
under Tressel.
Yeah, I certainly remember, or maybe it was a block point after or something. I just remember being down on the field, and it was supposed to be automatic, and I turned my back to it, and you hear foot meet leather and hand meet leather, and then you're like, oh, what the hell just happened here?
They kicked a bunch of them against NC State, one of those 2 times. But, yeah, that's been a long time ago.
That's not to say it's not important. I think special teams are very important. Kickoff coverage is probably less important today. If you put the ball in the end zone or hit a pop-up inside the 10-yard line, they're going to be more inclined to fair catch that and move it out to the 25-yard line. And I think the kickoff team is just fine with that. If you start on your 25, that's good starting position for them on defense. So again, I don't want to minimize special teams. I think punt coverage is as important now as it's ever been, pinning teams back. If you don't score or kick a field goal, pin them back inside their 10-yard line and make them go 80 or 90 yards. So to me, it's maybe a different emphasis on special teams today than it's been in previous years.
Well, go back and I'll jump in real quick, Kevin. You go back and look, they barely attempt more than one a game in terms of field goals. So
yeah.
It's like 2016 or something. They were 1.5 a game. And so it's not, it is important, but Ryan Day isn't a huge fan of them anyway, in terms of field goals. Like Urban Meyer wasn't, but he kicked more than Ryan Day. I think Ohio State's more aggressive under Day. I was more concerned about the punting than the field goal kicking, just because the punting it happens 5, 6, 7 times a game as opposed to a kickoff or a field goal.
That was the point I was going to make. I mean, if everything goes right and you play your 12 league game, or you play your 12 regular season games, a conference championship game, and 2 playoff games, you have 15 games. If we're not going to see into the 20s in field goal attempts, I mean, and if we do, something horribly went wrong along the way, you're going to see a lot more punts along the way. I think in a lot of instances, though, just the lack of urgency on how special teams were set up for the spring game when you're kind of going one-on-one, you're just kicking it out there. Yeah, maybe once the adrenaline gets flowing or whatever, Ohio State going back to the Australian, football, Australian rules football pipeline, Pro Kick Australia to bring in Jesse Mirko. I think he'll get it figured out. But as Tony said, that's going to be something that's going to be a lot more critical in terms of just game in and game out situations. Sure, there might be a field goal that is of significance at some point, maybe more so for the gamblers than anything. But I don't think that it's ever really going to be an instance of where Ohio State's going to need to pull one out unless we're really getting into the college football playoffs and Ohio State is equal talent with its opponent, because within the confines of the regular season, not a lot of teams that Ohio State's going to draw that are going to be within the same zip code as them in terms of talent.
I did see something that I liked from the special teams, just a new idea. Ryan Day with the kickoffs, it was one-on-one. It was the kicker kicking to the returner with no blocking, no tackling. And I thought, let's do that. Let's just have one-on-one kickoff returns. And then you'd start putting guys out there like Antoine Winfield as your kicker or Andy Katzenmoyer as your kicker. And then, just see what happens with both of those guys getting 30 yards of room to run and see if they can bring those guys down. Because I know Antoine Winfield could.
I think we're discounting the field goals a bit too much here, considering that had they hit 10 more against Alabama, they could have won that game. They might have had to kick them from 70 yards, but they could have won that game. So.
They would have needed 10 more field goals. That kind of gives you an idea how bad they got blown out.
But you're right.
I think Alabama could have put up probably 28 more points. So then they would have had to kick another 10 field goals.
But they do rely on the field goals too much in the postseason. I think that's been clear over the last couple of years. And I wouldn't be surprised if like a quarter of their field goals this season come from the playoffs.
Playoffs?
Playoffs, yes, Jim.
Playoffs?